Maya Chen stood before the massive crystalline doors of the Hall of Bloodlines, her human hands trembling slightly as she clutched the ancient genetic scanner. The device hummed with alien technology, its blue light casting eerie shadows across her face. Around her, beings from a dozen different species whispered in languages that her universal translator struggled to interpret. The Zephyrian Council had summoned representatives from every known bloodline in the galaxy to witness the selection of the new cosmic heir. For 3,000 years, the position had remained vacant after the last heir died in the Great War against the Shadow Fleet. Now, with dark forces stirring at the galaxy's edge, the ancient laws demanded a new guardian be chosen. Maya had arrived on the council ship 3 days ago, one of only 5 humans selected for genetic testing. The other 4 had already been dismissed, their DNA lacking the mysterious markers that the ancient texts described. She was humanity's last hope, though she wondered if hope was the right word. The other species looked at her with barely concealed disgust. Another human waste of time, hissed Kralex, the Vorthan representative. His serpentine body coiled around itself as he spoke, venom dripping from his fangs.
These creatures have been in space for barely 2 centuries.
They couldn't possibly carry the bloodline of the ancients. The ethereal delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with agreement. The probability calculations show 0.01% chance of human compatibility. This is merely protocol. Maya tried to ignore their words, but they stung. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Council, barely tolerated by most species. Earth had only made contact with alien civilizations 50 years ago, and many still viewed humans as primitive warmongers. The fact that she was here at all was considered a joke by most. The massive doors began to open with a sound like thunder. Beyond them lay the Hall of Bloodlines, a chamber carved from a single piece of living crystal that had grown for millions of years. Bioluminescent veins pulsed through the walls, and at the center stood the Throne of Judgment, a seat that had waited empty for millennia. "Enter, candidates," boomed the voice of Archon Valdris, the ancient being who served as keeper of the bloodlines. His species, the Temporal Masters, had existed since the galaxy's formation. His forearms gestured for the group to proceed, while his 3 eyes studied each candidate with unsettling intensity. Maya walked forward with the others, a proud draconian warrior whose scales gleamed like emeralds, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into rainbow patterns, a shadow walker whose form seemed to bend reality around it, and herself. Each step echoed in the vast chamber, amplified by the crystal's natural resonance. The testing procedure was ancient beyond measure. Each candidate would place their hand on the bloodline stone, a relic from the first civilization to achieve cosmic consciousness. The stone would read their genetic memory, searching for traces of the progenitor bloodline that could awaken the dormant guardianship protocols scattered throughout the galaxy. The Draconian went first. Korath the Flamebearer had conquered 17 star systems and commanded fleets that numbered in the millions. When he touched the stone, it flared with red light for several seconds before dimming to nothing, the chamber filled with disappointed murmurs. The crystalline candidate, whose name was an unpronounceable harmonic frequency, approached next. Her species had mastered energy manipulation and could reshape matter at the molecular level. The stone pulsed with brilliant white light, holding the glow for nearly a minute before fading. Several delegates gasped. It was the strongest reaction in over a century. The Shadow Walker's turn came next. These beings existed partially outside normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to kill and capable of traveling instantly across vast distances. When the dark figure touched the stone, reality seemed to bend around it. The light that emerged was deep purple, alien and disturbing. It lasted 40 seconds before vanishing. Finally, it was Maya's turn. The other candidates stepped back, some shaking their heads in pity. She could hear whispered conversations about the futility of human testing. Her legs felt weak as she approached the ancient artifact. The bloodline stone was smooth and warm to the touch, humming with power older than Earth's sun. The moment her palm made contact, something extraordinary happened. The stone didn't just light up, it exploded with brilliance that forced everyone to shield their eyes. The light wasn't one color, but every color, cycling through spectrums that some species couldn't even perceive. But instead of celebration, the chamber erupted in chaos. "Impossible," Archon Valdris shouted, his 3 eyes wide with shock. The readings are off the charts, but she's human. This cannot be. Kralix reared up, his hood flaring.
It's a trick.
Some human technology interfering with the ancient systems. The ethereal delegate pulsed frantically. Genetic contamination. The bloodline has been corrupted by primitive DNA. Other delegates joined the outcry. The proud species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia couldn't accept that a human, a member of what they considered the most insignificant race, could carry the pure bloodline they all coveted. The test is invalid, declared General Thex of the Hegemony Fleet. We demand a full investigation into human tampering. Maya stood frozen, her hand still on the stone which continued to pulse with impossible light. She wanted to speak, to defend herself. But the cacophony of alien voices drowned out any attempt. Archon Valdris raised his 4 arms for silence. His ancient voice carried absolute authority. The bloodline stone cannot be deceived or manipulated. Its judgment is absolute. However, he paused, his 3 eyes studying Maya with a mixture of wonder and concern. Given the unprecedented nature of this result and the concerns raised by the council members, I must convene a full tribunal. The pronouncement hit Maya like a physical blow. She had passed the test that others had failed. Yet instead of acceptance, she faced rejection based on her species alone. The human candidate will be barred from the Hall of Bloodlines pending investigation, Valdris continued. Guards will escort her to quarters while we determine if this result is genuine or the product of some unknown contamination. As armored guards approached her, Maya finally found her voice. I didn't cheat. I didn't do anything except touch the stone like everyone else. But her protest fell on deaf ears. The galaxy's most powerful beings had already made their decision. As she was led away, the bloodline stone continued to pulse with light, as if calling out to her retreating form. What none of them knew was that in the deepest vaults beneath the hall, ancient systems were awakening. Systems that had waited 3,000 years for the return of the true bloodline, and they recognized something in Maya Chen that the proud alien races refused to acknowledge. She was exactly what the galaxy had been waiting for. Deep beneath the Hall of Bloodlines, in chambers that hadn't seen visitors for 3 millennia, something stirred. The Guardian had been waiting in stasis since the last Heir fell in battle against the Shadow Fleet, its massive form powered down to conserve energy for this exact moment. The entity was neither machine nor biological creature, but something far more ancient, a fusion of technology and consciousness created by the progenitors themselves. Standing 30 feet tall when fully activated, its body was composed of flowing liquid metal that could reshape itself at will. Crystalline cores throughout its form pulsed with the same energy that powered stars. As the bloodline stone's resonance reached the deep chambers, the Guardian's primary consciousness matrix began to activate. Sensory networks that had been dormant for thousands of years started processing data. The first thing it detected was the familiar genetic signature it had been programmed to recognize above all others. The true heir had returned. But something was wrong. The Guardian's sensors indicated that the heir was being held in detention rather than being prepared for the coronation ceremony. This created a logical conflict in its core programming that required immediate investigation. Meanwhile, Maya sat in her assigned quarters, a luxurious but clearly guarded suite several levels above the main hall. 2 hegemony soldiers stood outside her door, their plasma rifles charged and ready. She had tried several times to contact the human embassy, but all communications were being blocked. The investigation had been going on for 6 hours now. Through her window, she could see shuttles arriving constantly, bringing experts from across the galaxy to examine the bloodline stone and determine if her test results were legitimate. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had achieved something that the galaxy's most advanced species couldn't, and they assumed it must be fraud. A soft chime from her door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see the 2 guards stepping aside for a figure she didn't recognize. The being appeared humanoid but was clearly artificial. Its skin had a subtle metallic sheen, and its eyes glowed with soft blue light. Greetings. Heir of the progenitors, the figure said in perfect English. I am a mobile extension of the Guardian. We must speak. Maya stood up quickly. I'm sorry, what? Guardian, who are you? The artificial being moved with fluid grace as it entered her quarters. I am the entity tasked with protecting and serving the rightful heir to the cosmic throne. You have awakened me from a sleep of 3,000 years, but everyone's saying I'm a fraud, that humans can't possibly carry the bloodline. The Guardian's extension tilted its head, processing this information. The current political entities lack understanding of progenitor genetics. They assume bloodline purity follows species lines, but this is incorrect. The progenitors seeded many worlds with their genetic markers, allowing their traits to emerge in any species that achieved sufficient evolutionary development. Maya sank back into her chair. So I really am? You carry the pure progenitor bloodline. My sensors detect genetic markers that haven't appeared in over 3 millennia. You are not just an heir. You are the most direct descendant we have encountered since the original progenitor civilization. The news should have been thrilling, but Maya felt overwhelmed. Then why won't they accept the test results? Fear, the Guardian replied simply. The current galactic powers have ruled through strength and technology. The concept of a primitive human possessing authority that supersedes their own threatens their entire worldview. As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside Maya's quarters. The door burst open as Archon Valdris entered, flanked by security officers from 3 different species. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Valdris demanded, his 3 eyes focusing on the Guardian's extension. No artificial intelligences are permitted in the detention area. The Guardian's extension straightened to its full height. I am not an artificial intelligence, Archon Valdris. I am the Guardian of the Bloodlines, and I serve only the rightful heir. Valdris took a step back, his forearms trembling slightly. Impossible. The Guardian has been dormant for 3,000 years. It would only activate for the true heir, yes, the Guardian confirmed. Which stands before you now. The tension in the room became electric. The security officers raised their weapons, but their hands shook. Everyone knew the legends of the Guardian, an entity so powerful it had once stopped an entire armada with a single thought. The investigation isn't complete, Valdris said, though his voice lacked conviction. We cannot simply accept the investigation is irrelevant, the Guardian interrupted. I do not respond to genetic tampering or technological fraud. My awakening is proof absolute of her heritage. One of the security officers, a draconian warrior, stepped forward. Even if that's true, she's still human. Humans are barely civilized. They wage war on their own planet, destroy their environment, and have no understanding of cosmic responsibility. Maya felt anger flare in her chest. She had heard these accusations countless times since humanity joined the galactic community. We're learning and growing. Every species had to start somewhere. The Guardian's extension turned to face the Draconian. The progenitors chose not to limit their bloodline to any single species. They understood that wisdom and strength come from diversity, not homogeneity. Humans possess qualities that make them ideal guardians: adaptability, creativity, and the ability to unite diverse groups under common cause. Ridiculous propaganda, scoffed another voice from the doorway. General Thex of the Hegemony Fleet entered the room, his cybernetic implants gleaming. Humans are violent primitives who couldn't even achieve peace on their own world before joining us. And yet, the Guardian replied, they are the only species in current galactic civilization to have faced extinction-level conflicts and chosen unity over dominance. They are the only species to have developed nuclear weapons and then stepped back from their use. They are the only species to actively seek cooperation with former enemies. Maya watched this exchange with growing amazement. The Guardian wasn't just defending her individually. It was defending all of humanity in terms she had never heard any alien use before. Valdris raised one of his 4 hands. Even accepting your activation as proof of heritage, there remains the question of preparation. The heir position requires knowledge of cosmic forces, understanding of ancient technologies, and command over systems that predate most civilizations. Which is why the Guardian exists, the artificial being replied. My function is to educate and prepare the heir. This process traditionally takes 1 standard year. A year. General Thex laughed harshly. The Shadow Fleet stirs at the galaxy's edge. Reports come in daily of dark ships probing our outer systems. We need immediate action, not a training program for a primitive. The Guardian's form suddenly shifted, growing taller and more imposing. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. You speak of the Shadow Fleet as if it were a new threat. I fought them 3,000 years ago. I know their tactics, their weaknesses, and their goals. The Heir I train will be prepared to face them in ways your modern military cannot comprehend. Maya stood up, feeling courage she didn't know she possessed. I want to learn. I want to help protect the galaxy. But I won't be judged by species prejudice. Valdris looked around the room at the various officials, reading their expressions. Finally, he spoke. The Council will debate this matter. Until then, both the human and this guardian entity will remain under observation. As the officials filed out, the Guardian's extension moved closer to Maya. Do not be discouraged. Truth has a way of emerging regardless of political resistance. What happens if they refuse to accept me? The Guardian's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. Then the galaxy will face the returning darkness without its greatest defense. And the consequences will be catastrophic for all species, including those who chose prejudice over wisdom. Outside Maya's window, more ships continued to arrive. The galaxy's leaders were converging to decide her fate, unaware that their decision would determine the fate of every living being in the cosmos. The Grand Council chamber had been transformed into a tribunal hall. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive amphitheater, their varied forms creating a stunning display of galactic diversity. At the center, Maya stood in an isolation field, visible to all but unable to hear their debates about her fate. 3 days had passed since the Guardian's awakening, and the political situation had grown increasingly complex. Half the galaxy viewed Maya's potential ascension as an opportunity for fresh leadership, while the other half saw it as a threat to the established order. War fleets from both sides had begun positioning themselves at strategic points throughout the galaxy. Archon Valdris called for order with a gesture of his 4 arms. We convene this tribunal to determine the legitimacy of the human candidate's bloodline claim. The evidence will be presented by 3 independent scientific committees. The first committee was led by Dr. Zelana, a crystalline scientist whose body refracted light into complex patterns as she spoke. Our analysis of the bloodline stone's reaction indicates genetic markers consistent with progenitor heritage. However, the presence of these markers in a human subject creates unprecedented questions about the nature of genetic inheritance across species. Maya watched as holographic displays showed her DNA structure, compared to samples from previous heirs. The similarities were undeniable, but she could see doubt in many delegates' expressions. The second committee was headed by Professor Keck, whose ethereal form pulsed with different colors as he communicated. Our temporal analysis confirms that the Guardian's awakening followed established protocols. No technological interference was detected. The entity's recognition patterns are hardwired at a quantum level and cannot be artificially triggered. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Even Maya's harshest critics couldn't argue with the Guardian's authentication. The final committee leader was Commander Vorthak, a hegemony officer whose cybernetic implants gleamed as he delivered his report. While the genetic and technological evidence supports the candidate's claim, we must address the practical concerns. Humans have demonstrated aggressive tendencies, internal conflicts, and limited understanding of cosmic responsibilities. General Thex stood from his position in the military section. I support Commander Vorthak's assessment. The human homeworld is still plagued by warfare, environmental destruction, and social inequality. How can someone from such a civilization be trusted with cosmic authority? Maya felt frustration building inside her. Every argument seemed to come back to humanity's perceived flaws, ignoring any positive traits or potential for growth. That's when the Guardian made its move. The massive doors at the back of the chamber opened, and the Guardian's true form entered. Not the small extension that had visited Maya, but the full 30-foot entity in all its glory. Liquid metal flowed like water while maintaining perfect structural integrity. Crystalline cores throughout its body pulsed with energy that made the air itself hum with power. The chamber fell completely silent. I request permission to address this assembly, the Guardian announced, its voice resonating through every corner of the vast room. Valdris hesitated before responding. The Guardian may speak, though its testimony cannot be considered unbiased given its programmed loyalty to the Heir. My loyalty is not programmed, the Guardian corrected, its form shifting to face different sections of the assembly as it spoke. My loyalty is earned through recognition of genetic truth and worthiness assessment. I have observed 47 different heirs across multiple species over the past 50,000 years. A draconian delegate stood up. If you've observed so many heirs, surely you understand why we question human suitability. The Guardian's crystalline cores brightened. I understand your concerns, but you base them on incomplete information. You judge humans by their current state rather than their potential. This is not how the progenitors intended heir selection to work. Explain, demanded Valdris. The progenitors were not the perfect beings your histories suggest. They were a young species when they achieved cosmic consciousness, barely 10,000 years beyond their first spaceflight. They chose to seed the galaxy with their genetic heritage precisely because they understood that wisdom comes from struggle, growth, and overcoming limitations. The Guardian gestured toward Maya. This human carries not just progenitor genetics, but also the experiential heritage of a species that has faced its own darkness and chosen to evolve beyond it. Her planet's conflicts were not signs of failure. They were the crucible that forged the traits necessary for cosmic guardianship. Dr. Zalana's crystalline form flickered with confusion. What traits specifically? Resilience in the face of overwhelming odds, the ability to find common ground between hostile factions, the courage to make sacrificial decisions for the greater good, the wisdom to learn from mistakes rather than repeat them. The Guardian's voice took on an almost reverent tone. These are qualities that cannot be programmed or inherited. They must be earned through experience. Professor Check pulsed with skeptical energy. Even accepting your assessment, the candidate lacks the knowledge and training required for the position. Which is why the Guardian-Heir partnership exists, the entity replied. I possess 50,000 years of accumulated knowledge and experience. She possesses the genetic heritage and experiential wisdom needed to make the crucial decisions that no amount of data can resolve. Maya found her voice at last. May I speak for myself? Valdris nodded, and the isolation field was lowered. Maya looked around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces, most displaying some degree of skepticism or hostility. I know you see humans as primitive and warlike. Some of those criticisms are fair. We've made mistakes and we're still learning, but that's exactly why I might be what the galaxy needs. She took a deep breath before continuing. Every species here has achieved great things, but most of you did it through domination or technological superiority. Humans learned to survive through cooperation. We learned to solve problems by bringing together different perspectives. We learned that strength comes not from being perfect, but from admitting our flaws and working to overcome them. A Shadow Walker delegate materialized near the speaking platform. Pretty words, but how do we know you won't lead the galaxy into the same conflicts that plague your homeworld? Because I've seen what those conflicts cost, Maya replied firmly. I've studied the wars, the environmental damage, the social inequality. I've also studied how we're working to fix those problems. The lessons we learned fighting each other are the same lessons needed to fight the Shadow Fleet. That unity is stronger than division, that cooperation achieves more than domination, and that sometimes you have to sacrifice personal advantage for the common good. The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates nodded thoughtfully while others argued among themselves. Maya could see the assembly dividing along species lines, with older civilizations generally opposing her claim, while newer species seemed more supportive. General Thex stood again. Regardless of philosophical arguments, we face immediate threats. The Shadow Fleet has been detected in 3 outer systems. We need experienced leadership, not idealistic speeches from an untrained human. The Guardian's form suddenly expanded, its crystalline cores blazing with brilliant light. You speak of experience? I have combat records spanning 50 millennia. I know the Shadow Fleet's tactics better than any general in your modern military. Combined with an heir who possesses the strategic thinking and adaptability demonstrated by human military history, we represent the most formidable defense the galaxy has seen since the original progenitor wars. Valdris raised his arms for silence. The tribunal will recess for deliberation. All evidence has been presented. As the delegates filed out for private discussions, Maya remained in the center of the chamber with the Guardian. She felt overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility and the resistance she faced. What happens if they reject me? She asked quietly. The Guardian's massive head turned toward her, its glowing eyes somehow conveying both ancient wisdom and genuine concern. Then we will face the darkness alone, as Guardians have always done when politics fails wisdom. Outside the chamber, War fleets continued to gather. The galaxy balanced on the edge of civil war, while in the deep void beyond, shadow ships prepared for an invasion that would determine the fate of all sentient life. The emergency alarms screamed through the Hall of Bloodlines as Maya was rushed from her quarters to the command center. 3 hours into the tribunal deliberations, long-range sensors had detected massive spatial distortions at the galaxy's edge. The Shadow Fleet had arrived in force, ending all political debate with the harsh reality of imminent invasion. Admiral Kresh, a grizzled hegemony veteran, stood before a holographic display showing the outer rim systems.
67 confirmed shadow ships, each the size of a small moon.
They've already destroyed the Epsilon Station monitoring post and are advancing toward the inhabited systems. Maya stared at the tactical display in horror. Each dot represented millions of lives, and the enemy force was moving with terrifying efficiency toward populated worlds. "How long until they reach the core systems?" asked Dr. Zalana, her crystalline form flickering with anxious energy. "At current speed, 18 standard hours," Admiral Kresh replied grimly. "Our combined fleets number less than 40 capital ships. We're outnumbered and outgunned." General Thek slammed his armored fist on the command console. "This is what comes of wasting time on political ceremonies. We should have been preparing defenses instead of debating bloodlines." The Guardian's extension, which had been standing silently in the corner, suddenly stepped forward. "You have been preparing defenses. Unfortunately, you've been preparing the wrong defenses." All eyes turned to the artificial being. Admiral Kresh's expression was skeptical. "Explain." "The Shadow Fleet cannot be defeated through conventional warfare. They exist partially outside normal spacetime, making them resistant to most weapons. They feed on fear and despair, growing stronger as they defeat their enemies. Your military strategy is based on principles that make them more powerful." "Then how were they defeated before?" Maya asked. The Guardian's glowing eyes focused on her. "They weren't defeated. They were contained. The progenitors built a network of cosmic anchors throughout the galaxy, devices that stabilize space-time and prevent shadow entities from fully manifesting in our reality. When the last heir died, those anchors began to fail. Archon Valdris, who had remained silent during the military briefing, finally spoke. "Are you saying the entire galaxy's defense depends on one person?" "Not one person," the Guardian corrected. "One partnership. The heir provides the genetic key to activate the anchor network. I provide the knowledge and power to operate it. Together, we can rebuild the barriers that keep the Shadow Realm separate from ours." Maya felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. "But the tribunal hasn't even decided if I'm legitimate." "The tribunal is irrelevant now," Admiral Kresh said bluntly. "If what the Guardian says is true, you're our only hope, whether the politicians like it or not." General Thex's cybernetic implants sparked with agitation. "This is insane. We're supposed to trust the fate of the galaxy to an untrained human and an ancient machine?" That's when the first attack reached them. The command center shook violently as emergency lights began flashing. A communications officer, her tentacles dancing frantically over her console, called out, "Shadow ship detected in the inner system. It bypassed all our outer defenses." The main display shifted to show a vessel that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating a hole in space that twisted the mind. As they watched, smaller shadow entities detached from the main ship and began moving toward the Hall of Bloodlines. "How is that possible?" Admiral Kresh demanded. "Our sensors showed the fleet was still 18 hours out." The Guardian's form began to change, growing larger and more imposing. "Shadow ships can move through folded space. This is a scouting force sent to eliminate the potential heir before the anchor network can be activated." Maya felt terror clawing at her heart, but alongside it came something else. A strange tingling sensation in her blood, as if something ancient was awakening within her. "I can feel them," she whispered. Then louder, "I can actually feel them approaching. It's like ice in my veins." The Guardian immediately moved to her side. "The progenitor genetics are responding to shadow presence. This is proof beyond any tribunal's ability to question." Explosions echoed through the station as the shadow entities began their assault. Through the viewports, Maya could see dark shapes moving through the corridors, leaving trails of frost wherever they passed. "All security teams to defensive positions," Admiral Kresh ordered. "Protect the heir candidate at all costs." Maya grabbed the Admiral's arm. "No, you don't understand. Running and hiding won't work. The Guardian said I need to activate the anchor network. How do I do that? The Guardian's crystalline cores pulsed rapidly. The primary anchor control is located in the deepest vault beneath this station. It requires both the Heir's genetic signature and my operational codes to activate. Then let's go, Maya said, surprising herself with her determination. General Thex blocked their path. This is suicide. The shadow entities are between us and the vaults. Even if you reach the controls, you have no training in cosmic forces. Then I'll learn fast, Maya replied. Because if I don't try, everyone dies anyway. The Guardian's form flowed past the general like liquid metal. The Heir speaks wisdom. Come, we must move quickly. As they left the command center, Maya could hear Admiral Kresh coordinating the defense. Plasma fire lit up the corridors as security teams engaged the shadow entities. But their weapons seemed to have little effect. The creatures moved like living darkness, absorbing energy attacks and feeding on the fear of the defenders. The path to the vault led through sections of the station that Maya had never seen. Ancient corridors carved from living crystal pulsed with bioluminescent light, and she could feel the age of the place pressing down on her. This wasn't just a building. It was a relic from the time of the progenitors themselves. Tell me what I need to know, Maya said as they descended through levels that grew, progressively older and more alien. The anchor network consists of 723 devices spread throughout the galaxy, the Guardian explained, while its sensors swept for threats. Each anchor stabilizes a region of space-time, preventing shadow entities from fully manifesting. When activated simultaneously, they create a barrier that forces the shadow fleet back to their own dimensional realm. They reached a security checkpoint where 3 shadow entities waited in ambush. The creatures looked like human-shaped holes in reality, outlined by crackling dark energy. Maya felt her blood turn to ice as they turned toward her. The Guardian flowed forward like a tidal wave of liquid metal. Its form shifted into weapons that Maya couldn't identify, projecting beams of energy that actually seemed to harm the shadow creatures. But even as it fought, more entities appeared. Keep moving, the Guardian commanded. I will hold them. Maya ran toward the vault entrance, but one of the shadow entities broke past the Guardian's defenses. It moved toward her with impossible speed, its form radiating a cold that made her breath visible in the air. When it reached for her, something extraordinary happened. The moment the shadow entity's essence touched Maya's skin, it recoiled as if burned. The creature's form began to destabilize, and it let out a shriek that sounded like reality tearing. The bloodline, the Guardian called out triumphantly. Pure progenitor genetics are toxic to shadow entities. Maya stared at her hands in amazement. Energy was flowing beneath her skin, creating patterns of light that seemed to repel the darkness around her. They reached the vault door, a massive barrier covered in symbols that seemed to move when viewed directly. The Guardian placed one appendage on a crystal panel, while Maya pressed her palm against what looked like a handprint carved in living stone. The door opened to reveal a chamber that took Maya's breath away. At the center stood a crystalline tree that stretched up beyond sight, its branches crackling with energy that connected to similar conduits disappearing into the walls. This was the heart of the anchor network, dormant for 3,000 years. Place your hands on the central trunk, the Guardian instructed. I will handle the activation sequence. Maya approached the crystal tree, feeling power radiating from it like heat from a star. When she touched its surface, her consciousness exploded outward. Suddenly, she could sense the entire galaxy, every star, every planet, every living being. She could feel the shadow ships moving through space like infected wounds in reality. Most terrifyingly, she could sense their goal, not just conquest, but the complete consumption of all life and light in the universe. I understand now, she whispered. This isn't just about protecting our galaxy. If they win here, they'll move on to the next galaxy and the next. They won't stop until everything is darkness. The Guardian's form merged partially with the crystal tree's base, creating a connection between ancient technology and artificial consciousness. Are you ready to bear this responsibility? Maya thought about Earth, about humanity's struggles and growth. She thought about all the species in the galaxy, even those who had rejected her. She thought about the children on 1,000 worlds who deserved a chance to grow up free from shadow. I'm ready. Together, they began the activation sequence that would either save the galaxy or destroy them all. The moment Maya's consciousness merged with the anchor network, Pain beyond description tore through her mind. 723 points of connection blazed to life across the galaxy, each one sending feedback directly into her nervous system. She screamed as information from thousands of star systems flooded her awareness. "Focus on my voice," the Guardian commanded, its form now partially integrated with the crystal tree's control matrix. "The initial connection is always traumatic. You must learn to filter the input." Maya gritted her teeth, trying to make sense of the overwhelming sensory data. She could feel planets spinning on their axes, stars burning in their fusion furnaces, and the cold void between systems. Worst of all, she could sense the shadow ships like infected wounds spreading through space. "I can't. It's too much," she gasped, blood trickling from her nose. "You are stronger than you know," the Guardian replied. "Human neuroplasticity is extraordinary. Your brain is already adapting to the input. Trust the process." Gradually, Maya began to understand the flow of information. Each anchor point in the network was like a lighthouse, sending out pulses of stabilized spacetime that kept reality coherent. For 3,000 years, they had been operating on backup power, slowly failing one by one. Now, with the Heir's genetic key and the Guardian's knowledge, they could be restored to full power. But the Shadow Fleet had other plans. Through the network, Maya sensed the main enemy force arriving at the outer rim worlds. The shadow ships moved like predators, surrounding populated systems and beginning the process that would drain all life and light from those regions. She watched in horror as entire planets went dark. "We have to activate the anchors now," she said urgently. "The process cannot be rushed," the Guardian warned. "If we attempt full activation without proper synchronization, the energy feedback could destroy every inhabited system in the galaxy." Maya felt frustration building alongside the cosmic power flowing through her veins. Every second they delayed meant more lives lost to the shadow entities. But through her connection to the network, she could sense the delicate balance required. The anchors had to be brought online in a specific sequence, with precise timing between each activation. Above them, the battle for the Hall of Bloodlines continued to rage. Maya could feel the defenders being pushed back as more shadow entities poured through dimensional rifts. Admiral Kresh's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "All remaining personnel to the Central Core. We're implementing Evacuation Protocol 7. They're going to abandon the station," Maya realized. "If we lose connection to the primary control matrix, the activation will be impossible," the Guardian finished. "We must accelerate the sequence." Maya focused her will on the first cluster of anchor points located in the galaxy's outer spiral arm. Through the network, she could sense the ancient devices responding to her genetic signature. Dormant systems that had waited millennia began drawing power from nearby stars, channeling stellar energy into space-time stabilization fields. The effect was immediate. Shadow ships approaching those systems suddenly found themselves forced back into normal space, vulnerable to conventional weapons for the first time in the battle. Local defense fleets, which had been helplessly watching their worlds die, suddenly found they could fight back. "It's working," Maya exclaimed, then winced as more feedback pain shot through her skull. "This is only the beginning," the Guardian warned. "The Shadow Fleet will adapt quickly. They will attempt to destroy the anchor points before we can complete the network." Through her expanded awareness, Maya watched the enemy response. The shadow ships were indeed adapting, focusing their attacks on the newly activated anchor points. These devices were incredibly resilient, but they weren't invulnerable. If enough shadow ships concentrated their firepower on a single anchor, they could overload its defenses. "I need to protect them," Maya said, instinctively reaching out through the network. What happened next surprised even the Guardian. Instead of simply monitoring the anchor points, Maya began to actively control them. Her consciousness flowed through the quantum connections, allowing her to redirect their defensive systems and coordinate their protective shields. "Impossible," the Guardian breathed. "No previous Heir achieved direct control on their first connection." Maya didn't have time to consider the implications. Through the network, she could sense a massive shadow ship moving toward the anchor point protecting the Centauri colonies. Millions of lives hung in the balance. She focused her will on that specific device, pouring energy into its defensive systems. When the shadow ship's attack struck, it met not just passive shielding but active resistance. Beams of pure space-time stabilization energy lanced out from the anchor, striking the shadow ship and forcing it back into dimensional retreat. But the effort cost her. Maya felt blood vessels bursting in her brain as the strain of direct control pushed her beyond normal human limits. "You must stop," the Guardian urged. "Your nervous system cannot sustain this level of integration." "I can't stop," Maya replied through gritted teeth. "Too many people will die." She continued the activation sequence, bringing online anchor points throughout the galaxy's middle rings. Each new activation sent cascading pain through her body, but also expanded her awareness. She could sense the fear and hope of billions of beings as shadow ships were driven back from their worlds. Through the network, she also began to understand the true nature of the Shadow Fleet. They weren't just invaders from another dimension. They were the remnants of a civilization that had faced the same choice Maya faced now. They had chosen to consume rather than protect, transforming themselves into entities of pure entropy that fed on the destruction of others. "They were guardians once," she whispered in horror. "Like us." "The progenitor's greatest failure," the Guardian confirmed. "A species that received the cosmic inheritance but used it for conquest rather than protection. They became what they were meant to defend against." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the shadow entity's presence. Would the same fate await her if she made the wrong choices? The answer came as she activated the anchor points protecting Earth's sector. Through the network, she could sense her homeworld, its blue oceans, green continents, and the 7 billion humans who had no idea their fate hung in the balance. She felt their hopes, their dreams, their struggles to become better than they had been. "No," she said firmly. "Humanity chose cooperation over domination. We chose to learn from our mistakes rather than repeat them. We're not perfect, but we're trying to be better." With renewed determination, Maya pressed forward with the activation sequence. The Guardian supported her efforts, its vast knowledge guiding her through the most complex technical requirements. Together, they brought online anchor after anchor, creating an expanding web of stable spacetime that pushed the Shadow Fleet back system by system. But the enemy wasn't finished. Through the network, Maya sensed something that filled her with dread. The shadow ships were concentrating their remaining forces for an assault on the Hall of Bloodlines itself. If they could destroy the primary control matrix, the entire anchor network would collapse. "They're coming here," she warned the Guardian. "Everything we've built will be destroyed." "Then we must complete the activation before they arrive," the Guardian replied. "How many anchor points remain?" Maya checked her awareness of the network. 47 in the galactic core region. "But if I activate them all at once, you will almost certainly die from neural overload," the Guardian finished. "However, the alternative is the consumption of all life in the galaxy." Maya looked around the crystal chamber, feeling the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on her shoulders. Above them, she could hear explosions as the final defenses of the station failed. Soon, shadow entities would breach even this sacred vault. She thought about her parents on Earth who had raised her to believe that with great power came great responsibility. She thought about the human astronauts who had volunteered for dangerous missions to explore space. She thought about all the species in the galaxy who deserved a chance to grow and learn and become something greater. "Do it," she said quietly. "Maya," the Guardian began. "Do it," she repeated more firmly. "Complete the network activation. Humanity didn't come this far to let darkness win." The Guardian's crystalline cores pulsed with what might have been admiration. "As you command, heir of the progenitors." Together, they reached out to the remaining anchor points, preparing for an activation that would either save the galaxy or destroy the last hope it had. The vault doors exploded inward as Maya and the Guardian began the final activation sequence. Shadow entities poured through the breach like living darkness, their forms radiating a cold that made the air itself crystallize. But instead of advancing, immediately they paused when they sensed the power building in the chamber. Maya felt her consciousness expanding to encompass the final 47 anchor points simultaneously. Pain beyond description tore through her nervous system as her human brain struggled to process information flows designed for cosmic entities. Blood streamed from her eyes and nose, but she held on. "The network is almost complete," the Guardian reported, its form now fully integrated with the crystal tree's control matrix. "But the shadow entities are interfering with the quantum connections." Through her expanded awareness, Maya could sense the enemy's strategy. They were using their dimensional abilities to create interference patterns in space-time itself, disrupting the delicate synchronization required for anchor activation. If they succeeded, the incomplete network would collapse catastrophically. The lead shadow entity, larger and more cohesive than the others, spoke in a voice like the whisper of dying stars. "You cannot stop what has already begun, little guardian. We have consumed 10,000 galaxies. Yours will be no different." Maya tried to respond but found she could barely speak. The strain of controlling cosmic forces was pushing her toward complete neural breakdown. Instead, she focused her will on maintaining the activation sequence despite the dimensional interference. That's when unexpected help arrived. Admiral Kresh burst through the destroyed vault entrance, leading a mixed force of soldiers from a dozen different species. Behind them came an even more surprising sight: delegates from the tribunal, including General Thex and Dr. Zelana. "Protect the Heir," Admiral Kresh commanded, raising a plasma rifle that had been modified with technology Maya didn't recognize. Dr. Zelana's crystalline form blazed with energy as she spoke rapidly. "We've reconfigured our weapons with Guardian-provided specifications. They should be effective against shadow entities." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Soldiers who had spent days arguing about Maya's legitimacy now fought desperately to protect her. Plasma bolts designed with ancient progenitor technology lanced through shadow entities, actually causing them damage for the first time. But the enemy was not defenseless. Shadow energy burst forth from the entities, aging metal to rust and turning living crystal to dust. Several defenders fell as dimensional rifts opened beneath their feet, sending them tumbling into the void between realities. Maya watched the battle through her connection to the station's sensors while simultaneously fighting to complete the network activation. Each fallen defender felt like a personal failure, but she couldn't afford to lose focus. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. "I can't hold the synchronization much longer," she gasped to the Guardian. "You must," came the reply. 37 anchor points remain. If we stop now, the feedback will destroy every system we've already activated." General Thex, his cybernetic implants sparking from shadow energy exposure, approached the crystal tree. "Tell me how to help," he said simply. Maya looked at him in amazement. This was the same officer who had called her a primitive fraud just days ago. "The dimensional interference," she managed to say. "If you could, disrupt their coordination." Understanding immediately, General Thex activated a device Maya had never seen before. The general's form became translucent as he phased partially out of normal space-time, moving to engage the shadow entities on their own dimensional level. The battle shifted dramatically. With their leader distracted by General Thex's dimensional assault, the shadow entities' interference patterns became chaotic. Maya seized the opportunity to activate another cluster of anchor points, 25 remaining. Admiral Kresh fell back to form a defensive perimeter around the crystal tree. "How much longer?" he called out. "Unknown," the Guardian replied. "The Heir is pushing beyond all safe parameters. Her neural pathways are burning out." Maya could feel her human brain beginning to fail under the cosmic load. Memories became confused. Basic motor functions started shutting down, and her vision filled with bright spots that weren't really there. But through it all, she maintained her grip on the anchor network. Dr. Zelana suddenly moved to the base of the crystal tree. "There may be another way," she announced, "if multiple consciousness could share the load." "Impossible," the Guardian said immediately. "The progenitor genetics are required for network interface." "But not for computational support," Dr. Zelana replied. Her crystalline form began to resonate at the same frequency as the control matrix. "My species can create quantum entanglement with crystalline structures. I can handle some of the data processing load." Without waiting for permission, she pressed her form against the crystal tree. Immediately, Maya felt some of the overwhelming pressure ease as Dr. Zelana's consciousness joined the network connection. 15 anchor points remaining. Other delegates began to understand what was happening. Professor Czech, the ethereal scientist, flowed forward to add his species' energy manipulation abilities to the effort. A Shadow Walker delegate phased in and out of dimensional space, helping to stabilize the quantum connections that the shadow entities were trying to disrupt. What had begun as a human's desperate attempt to save the galaxy had become a cooperative effort by multiple species. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she realized that the same diversity General Thex had criticized was now their greatest strength. 8 anchor points remaining. The largest shadow entity, seeing victory slipping away, abandoned its battle with General Thex and moved directly toward Maya. Its form expanded until it filled half the chamber, radiating entropy that aged everything it touched. "If I cannot stop the network," it hissed, "I will consume the air directly." Maya tried to defend herself, but she was too deeply connected to the anchor system to move. The shadow entity reached for her with tendrils of pure darkness. That's when the most unexpected defender appeared. Archon Valdris, the ancient temporal master who had presided over her tribunal, materialized between Maya and the shadow entity. His forearms moved in complex patterns as he manipulated time itself, creating temporal shields that slowed the entity's attack. "I have lived for 50,000 years, Valdris declared, his 3 eyes blazing with power. "I will not let the galaxy die due to political prejudice." 3 anchor points remaining. The combined effort of multiple species was working, but Maya could feel her life force burning away like a candle in a hurricane. Her heart was beating irregularly, her nervous system was shutting down, and she knew she wouldn't survive much longer. "Almost there," the Guardian encouraged. 2 points remain. 1 anchor point remaining. Maya reached out with the last of her strength toward the final device. Ironically, it was located in the Sol system, protecting Earth itself. As she made the connection, she felt something unexpected. The anchor wasn't just another device in the network. It was the master control, the keystone that would lock all the others into permanent activation. The moment she touched it with her consciousness, the entire galaxy transformed. 723 anchor points blazed to life simultaneously, creating a web of stable spacetime that stretched from the galactic core to the outer rim. Shadow ships throughout the galaxy found themselves forced back into normal space, vulnerable and disoriented. Local defense fleets, equipped with Guardian-provided weapon modifications, began systematically destroying enemies that had seemed invincible just moments before. The shadow entities in the vault let out screams of rage and despair as dimensional rifts opened beneath them, dragging them back to their own realm. The largest entity made one final attempt to reach Maya, but the stabilized spacetime around the Hall of Bloodlines rejected its presence entirely. "It is finished," the Guardian announced as the last shadow ship was driven from galactic space. Maya collapsed to the crystal chamber floor, her consciousness finally releasing its grip on the cosmic network. She was barely alive, her body pushed far beyond human limits, but she was smiling. "We did it," she whispered, "all of us together." Dr. Zalana knelt beside her, her crystalline form pulsing with gentle healing energy. "Yes, we did, and I believe we learned something important in the process." Around the chamber, representatives from species that had been enemies just hours ago worked together to tend the wounded and restore the damaged systems. General Thex helped Admiral Kresh to his feet, while Professor Keck provided energy to power emergency life support. Archon Valdris approached Maya with an expression she had never seen on his ancient features: humility. "I owe you an apology, heir of the progenitors. We judged your species by your past rather than your potential. You have shown us that true strength comes not from individual perfection, but from the courage to unite diverse abilities toward a common goal." Maya tried to respond but found she could barely stay conscious. The Guardian's extension knelt beside her, its form gentle and concerned. "Rest now," it said softly. "The galaxy is safe, and you have proven that humanity deserves its place among the stars. When you recover, we will begin the real work, not just maintaining the anchor network, but building a better future for all species." As Maya drifted towards Slee,